Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. And welcome to today's Stats Café. Today, the topic we'll be getting around is digitalization, one of the very current and topical issues in economic statistics. My name is Rika Hansen, and I'm currently in charge of ESCAP's Statistics Division. Now, today's cafe is part of a global effort to increase, to revise the system of national accounts. And it's also, today's cafe is also part of ESCAP's efforts to increase the awareness of this revision process and the contributions from Asia and the Pacific in the revision, so that we all end up with a system of national accounts that really suits our needs and also reflect the economies in this region as well as elsewhere in the world. Now, the latest update of the system of national accounts, it was back in 2008, and a lot of things have happened in our economies and to our economies since then, and not least in the space of digitalization, the digital economy. So the focus of today's cafes, well, we chose digitalization for a number of reasons. It's just one of several topics that are included in the revision of the system of national accounts. But we chose digitalization because it has been highlighted as a very, very important topic by statisticians from Asia and the Pacific countries. We are hearing this from the members of the steering group on economic statistics here in Asia and the Pacific, a group of very seasoned national accountants that get together on a regular basis to discuss economic statistics in Asia and the Pacific. We've also heard it in numerous other events and on other occasions, and one of those was a management seminar that was organized by the Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific, where we discussed the future of economic statistics. And one of the most talked about topics in that seminar was also digitalization. We chose digitalization also because it is part of the research agenda for the SNA update. And we hope that today's cafe will generate some inputs that are of use to the global revision process, and also generate some ideas for all of you who are listening in, how you can experiment with digitalization in your national accounts compilation. So with us today, we have some excellent experts and presenters to take us through this topic. We will be hearing both from Statistics New Zealand, BPS Indonesia, and the Department of Statistics in Malaysia. I will leave the detailed introductions of you to our moderator of today, my dear colleague, Alec Nyasulu, whom many of you will know. Alec is the colleague in ESCAP who manages the regional program on economic statistics in Asia and the Pacific. So I think he will be a familiar face to many of you. Alec, I will hand it over to you to take us through the rest of the hour.
Thank you, Rike, and good morning and maybe good afternoon to colleagues. And Rike, thanks for saving some of my time to introduce myself. And maybe before we start, I'll just maybe say one or two housekeeping issues. First of all, please, you can use the chat function to put any questions that you have, so that we can pick them up at the end of the presentation. And if need be, at the end of the presentation, when we give you an opportunity to ask, please, you can also just raise up your hand, And just remember to be as engaged as possible so that we can get as much as information as we can. And if you do not have questions, but feel free to say or highlight any comments that you have on the very specific presentations by our dear colleagues from the 3 countries. And as part of the feedback process throughout or towards the end of the session, we'll also give you an opportunity to give us some feedback on the organization of this Stats Cafe in form of an evaluation form. So we'll kindly request each one of you to take a few minutes at the end of this session to just fill in this information. Is good for our feedback so that we can do better next time. So with these few remarks, I would like to invite our first presenter this morning. Our first presenter this morning is Mr. Jerwin Kaur. Jerwin is a senior design analyst from Statistics New Zealand, and he will give us a presentation on measuring the digital economy in New Zealand. So, Jaron, you have the floor, and I hope you share the presentation. So I'll give you 15 minutes to make your presentation. You have the floor, Jaron. You are muted, please. Jaron, you are muted. You are muted.
Not anymore.
Okay, thank you
very much for your introduction, Alec, and Ricky as well. Thank you for your introduction. And I'm going to share the presentation now. Can you see this?
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
Very good. So what I'm going to talk about is about the plans and initiatives we have in New Zealand around measuring the digital economy. So I'm not going to present any estimates, but more about an outline of where we would like to go. First of all, the question, why do we want to measure the digital economy? And it is about making digital transformation visible in economic statistics and to understand the impacts of digital transformation. And visibility is an important point because a lot of digital activity is already captured in our economic statistics, but it's not visible. So we cannot see the transformation. And a key point of measuring digital economy is about making it visible. So a little bit about earlier work in New Zealand on measuring the digital economy. We had a digital nation domain plan that was about describing the data needs around the digital nation, and it was a collaboration between Statistics New Zealand and our Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. And also we have an analyst, a principal analyst now, Hamish Grant at Statistics New Zealand, who published a paper on accommodation and the sharing economy in New Zealand. And it was experimental work, and that included estimates, and it's available on the internet as well for if you want to have a look at that. Now the context for our current plans and our initiatives to develop comprehensive measures of the digital economy in New Zealand. And the driver for this is for a large part now a digital strategy for Aotearoa New Zealand, which is a draft. And the driver for this, in New Zealand, we have government ministers with multiple portfolios. And our current Minister for Statistics is also the Minister for Digital Economy and Communications. So he is really keen on driving this digital strategy and also to have the measures to support it. The other foundation for our plans is the international context, and that is the OECD framework for measuring the digital economy, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about that. And that those two, this digital strategy and the OECD framework, are framing up our plans to measure the digital economy in New Zealand. So first of all, this digital strategy. First of all, it's not a government policy. It's a draft version that's going to be released soon for public consultation. But the key point is that it will be an overarching framework with 3 pillars around trust, inclusion, and growth. So it's not just about economic measures and the national accounts, but it sits in a broader context. And we, as Statistics New Zealand, support that strategy. Then coming to the OECD framework, and the question, what is the definition of the digital economy? On the left, you see a document, a roadmap toward a common framework for measuring the digital economy. And I find it a really useful document. It has a very comprehensive definition of the digital economy, but the OECD takes a flexible definition, and that's based on a digital economy report from UNCTAD from a couple of years ago. And that has a tiered approach. So there is a core measure of the or core part of the digital economy that is basically the ICT sector. Then there's a narrow definition that is the digital economy, which includes the platform economy. And there's a broad measure, a broad definition of the digitalized economy, which includes things like e-commerce, precision agriculture, and algorithmic economy. The conceptual framework for the national accounts from the OECD looks like this, and it's basically around digital supply and use tables. So an industry and a product view at the same time. So the line here, the dashed line, indicates what's above that, that's within the production boundary of the system of national accounts, and below it's not within the production boundary because this is around products, goods and services that are for free. There's quite a bit of focus in the OECD framework on the nature of digital activity or transactions. Is a good or service digitally ordered and or digitally delivered? And that's an important point in this framework. And digital supply and use tables, it's really the core of also what's in discussion for the update of the system of national account. What we are mainly focusing on in New Zealand is not so much the digital supply and use tables yet, but it's about 7 digital industries that are defined in the OECD framework to make the digital economy visible, as I mentioned at the start of my presentation. So first of all, there's the digitally enabling industries, basically the ICT sector, which includes internet service providers, telecom companies, computer manufacturers, etc. Secondly, there's digital intermediary platforms charging a fee, like food delivery companies, travel booking portals, online auctions, etc. Then data and advertising driven digital platforms like search engines and social media platforms. Then there's firms dependent on intermediary platforms. And that could be, for example, Uber drivers, depending on the platform from Uber. E-tailers are businesses in retail and wholesale who get their orders mainly via the internet, basically more than 50%. Digital online firms, digital-only firms providing financial and insurance services is another digital industry in this OECD framework. And the last one is all the other producers only operating digitally. And our plan is really, before we really move into the space of digital supply and use tables, into trying to get measures for those 7 digital industries. The OECD has a roadmap for this as well. They recognize that digital supply and use tables will be very ambitious. So they say even in this document, it's an extremely ambitious task. So the first step would be also for international comparability, so that as many countries as possible can develop indicators for the digital economy that's focusing on high priority indicators for digital industries. And then also some key products for the digital economy, like cloud computing services. And then, as I mentioned before, expenditures split by the nature of the transaction, so digitally ordered, delivered, etc. Then I mentioned the digital supply and use tables, but the ultimate goal is to develop digital satellite accounts, which includes goods and services that lie outside of the current S&A production boundary. For example, data, what's the value of data? There's not a single country that has achieved this yet. The USA, with the Bureau of Economic Analysis, they are quite far with their digital supply and use tables, followed by Statistics Canada and the Australian Bureau of Statistics. But yeah, they are still developing that, but no country, as I said, has digital satellite accounts yet. So what is our plan in New Zealand? With limited resources to do this. So we take an approach, an admin data first approach. That's how we call it. I come back to that. And we start with exploration and collaboration to develop measures of digital industries. And by admin data first, we mean that we not trying to set up new surveys to collect the data, but try to look at sources, admin data, but it could also be alternative data sources that's available already that can help us to identify and come up with indicators for the digital economy or the digital industries specifically. So we're working with our COVID-19 data team that was set up last year, and they work a lot with other government agencies, private sector partners. And a few things that we will be trying to do is get lists of digital businesses, for example, via a research institute or New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and match that to our statistical business register to improve the coverage of digital businesses. We also would like to explore web scraping to identify digital businesses. And as I said, we want to collaborate, and that includes collaboration with the digital platform providers. I say a little bit about a digital economy data portal in my next slide. And I mentioned already the collaboration across government and the private sector, but we're also looking at international collaboration opportunities to learn from other countries and get ideas how we could come up with indicators and develop the sources and methods for that. This is a slide about our COVID-19 data portal that was set up in the middle of last year. So it has a lot of indicators, short-term indicators, with data from Statistics New Zealand, but also from other government agencies and from the private sector. And what I put up here is broadband usage on a daily basis from February 2020 until last Friday. And in New Zealand, we are in a COVID lockdown again since last week, Wednesday. We had 6 months without any infections in the community, but the Delta variant has entered the community in New Zealand, and seems we are well prepared to work from home because there's suddenly a big spike in broadband usage in the last few days. But the idea is here as well, this is a portal that is set up to collect a lot of information and treat it in a standardized way and have graphs that can be where a date range can be selected and can be fine-tuned with regional data as well, and to have something similar for our digital strategy, so including growth, trust, and inclusion indicators. In terms of indicators themselves, developing them, we're not quite ready to do that yet due to limited resources. There's a lot of resources going into analyzing impacts of COVID, but we have some ideas how we can do that. First of all, for the digital enabling industry, we can use our annual enterprise survey data as a proxy for output and value added according to the system of national accounts. And the ICT sector is defined with quite detailed industry classes. And that's also important to note that this is below our design level of this survey and the usually quality assurance. So to come up with a robust estimate for the digital enabling industry, we need to do a bit more than just pick out that data. It needs a bit more analysis. Similar for e-tailers industry, we have some ideas how we can do that. We need to combine different data sources. We have some information about internet sales proportions from our business operations survey. And that is, remind you, e-tailers is around retail and wholesale industries. But that's not quite enough yet. And we're also looking at using electronic card transaction data. And we know that mail delivery businesses like New Zealand Post, they have a lot of data, but it's also based on card transaction data. It's their business to deliver packages to households and businesses. So they're very keen on having a lot of data about e-commerce, and they do that e-commerce more generally. And they're doing a lot of work in that space. What we also can do is updating our previous work that I mentioned at the start about accommodation in the sharing economy, and expand that with other topics than just accommodation, for example, ride sharing and food delivery. And admin data first means that we not exclude doing anything via surveys, of course. So there, if we have surveys in the field already, we can look at including questions that can help us to come up with indicators for digital industries. So we're currently starting reviews of our business operations survey and our ICT supply survey. And this is my last slide. So our next steps, I have focused on saying that we are doing a lot of exploration and collaboration. So that continues until mid-2022, making use of the COVID-19 data team that we have as well, which includes some data brokers, collaboration, and supporting the further development of the digital strategy for Aotearoa. And beyond mid-2022, that we would like to move into actually developing and producing measures of the digital economy, in particular the digital industries, but that depends on the available funding and resources we will get for this work, and we are competing with other priorities, including in social and environmental statistics. And that is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions or comments?
Jaron, thanks very much. And I think I can already see a question coming from your colleague Hamish there. He's put some questions in the chat. Can I read them out, or you can check them out?
Yeah, I can see it. Some of the key challenges. So Hamish is asking, what would you say are some of the key challenges New Zealand faces in producing digital economy estimates? One of the key challenges I see is developing the capability. It requires a new way of working for us. It's about combining new data sources. Maybe some modeling is involved, some working with assumptions. So it's not that we can start immediately with doing that. It requires a learning process. So that's one of the key challenges. I see, and also working with multiple partners, relationship building to source the data in the first place. Another challenge is maybe that the usual quality we require from our statistics, we cannot achieve that in the first instance with digital economy measures. But it's important that the data that we get, the estimates we come up with, provide insights, and there's maybe more uncertainty around those measures in the first instance, but it's better than having nothing. It gives us an indication. Thank you, Hamish, for your questions.
Yes, there is another question coming from Ramiz Udi. He asks, what types of prediction model works for the digital economy, including indicators?
Okay. I must say I cannot answer that question. So I haven't been involved with prediction models specifically for digital economy. I've only moved into this space 3 months ago or something like that. So, but maybe there's some other people in this meeting who could give an indication. Thanks for the question. It's a good question.
And there is a question from Enrique and Christoph.
Yeah.
So Enrique is saying, what is the time frame of the NZ government's digital strategy, and how does the timeline for Stats NZ work in this space match the time frame? And also, do you plan to prepare a monitoring framework for the digital strategy to specifically guide work related to Stats New Zealand?
Yeah. Good question. And our time frame to develop the digital industries is around 3 to 4 years. Our minister, of course, would like to see digital supply and use tables and digital satellite accounts as soon as possible, but it will require time. But what the plans we are working with, they are based on 3 or 4 years, and hope in that period we hope to cover all digital industries and make a move into some of the key products like the cloud computing services to move into the space of the digital supply and use tables.
Okay. And then, of course, the second part of Ricky's question has to do with whether you guys plan to prepare a monitoring framework for the digital strategy to more specifically guide related work by Stats NZ. Yeah. So then a kind of a framework for monitoring that strategy?
Yeah. We don't have plans for that yet, as the strategy is not yet released and it's first out for consultation. Of course, people are interested to see data already to have some benchmarks. Maybe a little bit is possible for that, but then over time, I'm sure there will be a demand for indicators to monitor the progress with the strategy. Yes.
And there is a question from Christoph. I think he's saying, how do you draw the line between digital and non-digital with respect to themes or industry, like whether this is a digital theme or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the digital transformation is going so fast that we always running a bit behind as national accountants and as statisticians. But yeah, how can we speed our work up? And yeah, a lot of businesses will move into the digital space. It's still useful to distinguish the 7 industries because in how far digital inputs are important for businesses. Of course, all businesses will have some digital inputs, but the extent of it determines as well the sort of the classification for the digital industries.
Yeah, and of course, the question was also saying that given that the COVID-19 situation has got many businesses go very digital, so that sort of distincting line is becoming so bright and
yeah.
Okay, I saw a hand up. Let me see whose hand was up. Okay, but there is a question from Bimnesh from Fiji Statistics.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Were
I can see
there
that.
any challenges? Okay, if you can read that question out, then I
were there
don't
any
have to read.
challenges and issues sourcing data from data brokers or private sector? How were these challenges overcome? And that's a very good question. And again, the answer relates to COVID, because with when COVID developed last year and we went in lockdown, there was a big need for data on all sorts of things. So other government agencies and the private sector were really keen to work together with Statistics New Zealand that the whole situation has really improved the collaboration between Stats New Zealand and other partners.
Okay, thanks very much. And maybe we take the last question, and if there are any, we can reserve them for the very end. So there is a question from Fayaz Said. It says, does the NZ is going to measure the e-commerce only through surveys or registers data, or will they be combined? Can you please make a clarification?
Yes, for e-commerce, we may be looking at electronic cards data as well, where we can distinguish if the card was present at the moment of transaction. So if it's online transaction, you can make that difference. So that's, but we need to get more detailed electronic card data, I think, to really make estimates for e-commerce.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jaren. I think that was a good response, and thank you very much for giving us more insight on what you guys are planning in Wellington. And I think that there are a lot of questions coming, and I think we can reserve some at the end of the session. So please hang around. And now we are going to proceed to the next presenter. We have our colleagues from BPS, Statistical Agency of Indonesia. We have, this is a joint presentation by Lofa and who is a statistician at BPS, and Nasruddin, who is a lecturer at the Polytechnic of Statistics, STIS in Indonesia. So the presentation is on alternative measurement of the digital economy in Indonesia. Lofa, you are ready to have the floor. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction, Alec. Okay, so I will jump to my presentation.
I forgot to say you have 15 minutes jointly. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Please confirm that you can see my slide. My first slide, it is.
Yes, we can see it, but please put it in presentation mode.
Okay. I have put my presentation in presentation mode. Is that something?
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. Okay, greetings everyone. I am Lofa from BPS Statistics Indonesia of Belitung Regency. And my presentation today will be about the use of digital currencies in measuring Indonesia's digital economics. One thing first, I think it is quite important to say that this topic is based on a study I and my partner, Mr. Nasruddin, wrote back then in 2019. So today's presentation will be the alternative measuring of Indonesia's digital economy, and also the comparison about what BPS Statistics Indonesia do now to measure Indonesia's digital economy. So this is based on what I wrote back then in 2019. Okay, let's start. So economic development of a nation is an important for the ongoing development process in a country. In line with this, the UN through the SDGs program also contribute to economic growth as one of the focus of problems that must be considered by countries in the world, especially in point 8 in decent work and economic growth. Talking about the economic, it is certainly cannot be separate about talking about the economic condition in the country itself. Analyzing this condition is not simple, especially after the countries in the world entered the era of information and communication technologies or ICTs. So let us take a look. Here the graphs show us about the individual using the internet based on percent of population in Indonesia in 2010 to 2019. We can see that it is extremely have the positive trend. So since its inception, the ICT sectors grows so fast and has an impact on other sectors, as stated on the report of OECD in 2020. Digital transformation affects economies and societies in complex and interrelated ways, demanding more strategic approach.
Can you move the slides, please? We're still on the cover slide.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but the presentation is not moving. It's just stuck on the first slide. Lofa, can we present the slides from here? Maybe, yeah, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, we can present the slides from here.
From here. Okay. Okay, I will continue.
Okay.
Okay. Am I already explained that slide, or I just
Yes, you did. You did the one with the previous slide before this one.
Okay. Okay. I will continue. The influence of ICT in this field eventually give birth to many new terms, such as information economies, new economies, and network economies. All these terms revert to the impact arising from the existence of information technology in the economic sector, where one of them is digital economy. So in Indonesia itself, digital economy is one of the topics that brought in G20 summit. And it is believed that technological innovation in the economic field can encourage an economic equality, creation of job opportunities, and expansion of financial inclusion. Now the question is, how do Indonesians optimize the potential of the digital economy itself? Of course, the answer is exactly by giving the accurate data. But back then in 2019, BPS Statistics Indonesia does not have a fixed measurement yet to measure the digital economy in the country. So responding to that problem, this study is occurred and used the digital currencies to, or as an approach to see the whole Indonesia's digital economy. So next slide. Next slide. Okay. Talking about the digital economy, as earlier said that from 2016, it is the studies about digital economy is begun to develop a lot, and it is developing a new way of definition or etc. Until in 2020, in the report of the ETF, the title "A Roadmap Toward a Common Framework from Measuring Digital Economy" said that Digital economy incorporates all economic activity reliant on or significantly enhanced by the use of digital inputs, including digital technologies, digital infrastructure, digital services, and data. It refers to all producers and consumers, including government, that are utilizing this digital input in their economic activities. But then, next slide, Alik, I'm sorry. Could you please? Yeah, in next slide. In defining digital economy, in OECD report, it is said that there are 3 different definitions. Overall, there are 2 broad approaches conventionally used to define the digital economy. The first type of definition follows a bottom-up approach, characterizing industries and firms, output or production process to decide whether they should be included in the digital economy or not. The second type of definition follows a top-down or trend-based approach. The first is identifying the key trends driving the digital transformation and then analyzing the extent to which these are reflected in the real economy. And the third definition that mentioned earlier also by Jeroen is the flexible definition approach. This definition you can see in the graph. It is this section then introduce a third types of definition which might be described as a flexible approach, breaking the digital economy into core and non-core components, and there be finding a compromise between adaptability and the need to arrive at some common ground on the meaning of the term. Okay, so in this study, we use this perspective, especially in the broad scope of digitalized economy. We can see that is the e-business, the e-commerce, etc. Under this definition, the digital economy consists of all sectors making extensive use of digital technologies, as opposed to sectors making intensive use of the digital technologies. Okay.
Rova, you have 7 minutes to go. Just
okay. Next. From that definition, okay, can I? Yeah, from the definition, the digital currencies we use in the study is the non-cash payment system, which is card-based payment instrument, and the e-money. We choose these 2 digital currencies because it is commonly used by the people in Indonesia to make the transaction in the e-business or in e-commerce. Next. Next one slides. Next. Okay, the use of the total transaction from NCP or non-cash payment transaction can be used to give us the overview from the digital economic growth or pattern that is shown in the graph. It is the proportion to Indonesia's GDP. It is known that the nominal transaction of NCP is increased year by year from around 30% in 2010 to more than 50% in 2019. Next, to see in the clearer graphic, Alik, please, or yes. So this is our main findings. We compare the Indonesia's economic growth and the total transaction on non-cash payment system growth in 2011 to 2020. We can see in the similar pattern in both of the growth, and in my slide, not in this slide, we also compare the total e-commerce transaction with the total transaction that non-cash payment system record, and we found that it is have the similar pattern, and we use that as a validation that the total transaction in non-cash payment system can be used as an approach for defining or measuring or see the overview of the growth or the pattern, the digital economy in Indonesia. Next slide. Okay, this is the current Indonesia's digital economy measurement. The first, why we over this approach to measure the digital economy measurement, because in Indonesia it is quite need some time to validity in the government regulation to legally collect the data about the digital economy. In 2019, we managed to conduct the e-commerce survey after the government regulation is made. Also, the number of samples in e-commerce survey in 2019 is more than 17,000, consists of around 16,000 samples from business actors throughout Indonesia and about 883 from data crawling marketplace that take place in Jakarta. The main constraint in this survey, in this e-commerce survey, is there is no complete sample frame yet because we're still developing the study about this survey, so that it is difficult to estimate at the national level. However, this survey has a more targeted sample list to get an overview of the total transaction made through e-commerce. Then we use the non-cash payment system, as I said before. Next. Okay, this is my last slide. From our study, we can conclude that the effectiveness of the use of digital currency in measuring the digital economy can be increased if the central bank can provide access for information to the active transfer that only used to make payment in the transaction in e-commerce of marketplace. But then if the central bank still needs time to provide the information, I think, or we think, digital currency from non-cash payment can still be used to provide an overview or as an approach to predict the growth or pattern of the digital economy in Indonesia. Okay. Next. Okay, I think that's all. If you want to ask the question or know about more about e-commerce survey, you can visit our website at dbs.co.id. I think that's all. Alik, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rowaditya, for a very wonderful presentation. And I think there's a question from Stats New Zealand. Joran is asking if you could say a bit more about the data crawling marketplace, please.
Okay, good question, and I think it is absolutely be asked, but unfortunately, I think I'm not the best one to explain about this because it is out of my division from the technical crawling data from the marketplace. Yes, okay. I also know that we use Python, but in the more technique in the crawling is maybe some other in this meeting can help me to explain.
Okay. There is another question again coming from Stats New Zealand by Hamish. He's asking, is there any possibility to get some more breakdowns from this data by industry or by product?
Oh, yeah, okay. The data we use in this study is not divided by the industry or the product. I think it is possible to know the whole complete data, but we don't have the legal access yet to access that type of data. So we just have the access to the aggregate nominal that is not split up by what products or what sectors like that.
Thanks. The questions are still coming in. There's a question from Crinton Moore. Is asking if at all thanks for the presentation, and asking whether there is any data in Indonesia, even very anecdotal at this stage, on whether COVID-19 has affected the rate of cash payments. For example, some people not wanting to handle cash, or there is an increase in businesses accepting any cash payments that previously did not do so.
Okay, maybe I can share a bit about my slide again. Can you see the slide now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. This is the graph that not been shown in the previous presentation. So, good question. The effect of the pandemic or COVID-19 in use of non-cash payment system. So, it is also our curiosity. So we compare the actual data, the GDP, and the total of 4 largest marketplace in Indonesia, and we see in the similar pattern of both. This is the comparison about the total transaction. We can see that in 2020 it is decreased extremely. Okay, we because the effect of this COVID-19 pandemic. Also, in this growth in 2020, we see in the similar pattern also that make us this is the validation of use the non-cash payment system. So we think that non-cash payment system is reflect our approach to see in the digital economy in Indonesia.
Thank you very much for the responses to those questions and for a very good presentation. And so, Lofa, this was very good, and we stop your presentation and the questions for the moment. And I think we're really running late on time. Hamish, we'll get back to your question at the end. And so at this stage, I would like to invite our next presenters. This is Nazareen Muharram. She's a Principal Assistant Director, and Mazareha Yaqub. She's a Data Scientist and Deputy Director from the Department of Statistics, Malaysia. So their presentation is Malaysia e-commerce performance and expectations. So you have the floor. Please. Mazleha.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Can you start?
Assalamualaikum. Greeting from Malaysia to all the participants who have joined today's Stats Café Series. And my sincere thanks to the organizer for giving us the opportunity to discuss and present Malaysia experience in estimating and compiling digital statistics in national accounts. Before I start my presentation, let me introduce myself. I'm Mazreha, and with me my colleague, Ms. Nur Azlin. We both will presenting the Malaysia e-commerce performance and expectation. Next. Next is the outline of the presentation, and we will start with the e-commerce overview, definition and history, DOSM initiative on the modernization, collecting data by big data technology, and next we'll go to the e-commerce performance and the expectation, and the last will be the moving forwards. The next slide, please. The next slide, we will present the overview of e-commerce. Okay, on the definition, we are using the OECD 2020 to collect e-commerce data through the economic surveys or census, and we also use the OECD Internet Economy Outlook 2012 to compile the value added of e-commerce, and Manual for Measuring ICT Access and Use by Household and Individual 2014 to conduct the ICT use and access by individual and household survey, ICTHS. Next slide. Next is the brief history on the compilation of e-commerce. We started in 2011 with the development of ICT satellite accounts, ICTSA. This initiative is in tandem with Malaysia moving towards the digital economy, where Digital Malaysia Lab has been set up under the Digital Malaysia Master Plan to plan the strategy on measuring the contribution of ICT and e-commerce to the Malaysia's economy. All the strategies and planning related to digital economy will be presented in the MSC Implementation Council and National E-Commerce Council that chaired by our Prime Minister. So we took almost 2 years to establish the ICTSA and finally published to public in 2014. And at the same time, we developed the surveys on e-commerce. So the ICTSA is used as the indicator on the use of internet by the individuals and household on e-commerce. And this survey began in 2013 finally, and in 2018 we start to conduct the survey annually. First report of this survey has been published to public in 2015. So meanwhile, survey on usage of ICT and e-commerce by establishment, ICTech, started in 2015 and has been conducted finally until now. So its first publication to public is in 2019. However, ICTech is embedded in the Economic Census 2016, and we had published the report as e-commerce parameter in 2017. So the findings has been used in the planning of a 12 Malaysian plan on digital economy. So in 2019, Malaysia has produced a Malaysia Digital Economy report, and this effort is to support and as an input to the National Digital Economy and Fourth Industrial 4.0 Council. So in 2020, ICTSA has produced the contribution of e-commerce by sector for the first time. So and in 2021, Malaysia able to produce e-commerce by quarterly. So next slide. Here is the latest publication on e-commerce, and this publication are available on our website. So next. Next is the categories of e-commerce. However, Malaysia only covers business to business, business to consumer, business to government, and other categories will be determined in ICTHS in the near future, since it involves the ICT and household activity. Involve household and individual activities. So other than ICTech and ICTHS, Losam also conducted other survey and census that have related to e-commerce as shown in the slide, and the year indicates the start of having e-commerce question. So the next slide, DOSM initiative in improving the data collection. Next, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, DOSM has initiated the establishment of informal sector and micro-industry database, and that includes the entrepreneur who did the online business and e-commerce. So next. Here is the flow on how we collect the information on e-commerce and online business. So the top e-commerce and online business in Malaysia will be identified, and we scrap the profiling from e-commerce site and social media based on keywords, and then merge the information and to form a database. However, it hard to classify the business whether it is informal or micro, since most of the individuals doing online business through social media will have more than one account, link or website. So next slide, please. Next slide on the big data. Previous slide before that. Okay, here. So we're also using the big data technology to collect the details of product price in e-commerce platform, and we already had a sub-module in DOSM big data platform, STAT BDA, namely price intelligence, and data from social media related to the e-commerce and online business were also taken by using web scraper to see the platform of buying and selling amongst users of social media platform. So next slide will present the performance of e-commerce. And first, we will start with the ICT and e-commerce contribution. So in 2019, ICT gross value added increased to 195.3 billion with a growth of 6.6%. And the contribution of ICT to GDP increased to 12.9% compared to 12.7% in 2018. And then the next slide. The contribution of e-commerce to GDP recorded an increment of 137 billion compared to 117.2 billion in 2018, and the contribution of e-commerce to GDP recorded 8.4%, comprising the contribution of other industries 6.2% and ICT industry 2.2%. Next slide. Next slide shows the gross of value added of e-commerce by finance sector, which is the new statistic published in ICT Satellite Account 2019. And the manufacturing sector is the highest contributor of e-commerce at 57.5%. This was followed by the services sector, 38.8%, and mining and quarrying 3.4%. Next slide. Next slide is the contribution of ICT or digital economy in 2019 was 19.1% compared to 18.7% in the previous year. And this increment was supported by ICT gross value added, which recorded 195.3 billion, and e-commerce for other industry of 94 billion. Okay, the next slide will present on the income and the expenditure of e-commerce, and I hand over to my colleague, Ms. Nur Azlin. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mas Reha. Next is e-commerce income and expenditure. In 2019, Malaysia income via e-commerce transaction recorded a value of RM 675.4 billion compared to 447.8 billion in 2017. For year 2020, income for e-commerce recorded at RM 896.4 billion, an increase of 32.7% compared to 2019. Meanwhile, for expenditure through e-commerce transactions, recorded a value of 301.5 billion in 2019 as compared to 228.8 billion in 2017 with the annual growth rate of 14.8%. Next. Income of e-commerce in Malaysia was dominated by the domestic market, which in 2019 was recorded at RM 591.8 billion with a contribution of 87.6% compared to the international market of RM 83.5 billion. For e-commerce expenditure, it was dominated also by the domestic market of 269.6 billion with a contribution of 89.4% compared to the international market RM 31.9 billion. Next. Okay. This income for e-commerce transaction by type of customer was obtained through business to business, which was RM 449.6 billion with an annual growth rate of 13%. This was followed by business to consumer at RM 193.9 billion and business to government at RM 31.8 billion. Expenditure from e-commerce transaction by type of customer was obtained through B2B, which was RM 177.6 billion, followed by B2C, RM 14.8 billion, and B2G, 9.1 billion. Next. Okay, the statistic display the e-commerce by establishment during movement control implemented nationwide in 2020. The statistics divided into three parts, which are the operational status of the establishments, effect on total income and expenditure, and also e-commerce income and expenditure. So it was recorded 38.1% of establishment operated during the MCO as compared to CMCO, 76.3%, and RMCO, 92.4%. And it is reported that business establishment will experience decline in total income, which during MCO, 79.6% of establishment reported decrease in total income, 62.1% CMCO, and 46.9% RMCO. Next. During MCO, 59.7% of establishments reported decrease in total expenditure, 43.4% during CMCO, while 31.4% during RMCO. In terms of e-commerce expenditure, 42% of establishment reported decrease during MCO, 19.8% CMCO, and only 11.6% during RMCO. Next. Next is our quarterly income e-commerce.
Nazarin, you have 2 minutes to wind up.
All right, thank you. So for year 2020, income for e-commerce has been produced by quarterly basis to measure the short-term Malaysia e-commerce indicator. Income for e-commerce recorded RM 896.4 billion in 2020, increased 32.7% compared to 2019. In the first quarter 2021, income for e-commerce recorded 254.6 billion, increased 30% year-on-year. Meanwhile, for the second quarter, 267.6 billion with an increase of 23.3%. Next is expectation. Next, please. Next, please. Okay. This is Malaysia expectation. National E-commerce Strategy Roadmap 2.0 as the catalyst for the growth of Malaysia e-commerce ecosystem is actually aimed to enhancing and accelerating Malaysia's e-commerce industry growth and innovation. By 2025, the Malaysia e-commerce market is targeted to be worth RM 1.65 trillion compared to RM 643.6 billion in 2019. Furthermore, it is targeted that 875,000 MSME will adopt e-commerce compared to 489,000 in 2020. Next, please. Second is My Digital. My Digital is a national initiative which symbolizes aspiration of the government to successfully transform Malaysia into a digitally driven, high-income nation and regional leader in digital economy. It's sort of combination of initiative and targets across 3 phases of implementation until 2030, which start with the phase 1, 2021 to 2022, will strengthen the foundation of the digital adoption. Phase 2 will cover 2023 to 2025, drive inclusive digital transformation, and the last phase will make Malaysia a digital content and cybersecurity lead in the regional market. Thank you. Over back to you, Mazriha.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Razin. As moving forward, Dozem, next slide, please. We will continue to conduct survey on e-commerce frequently and publish the indicators consistently, and at the same time, Dozem will explore the use of mobile phone data to obtain the information on e-commerce transaction. Next, we'll also leveraging the price intelligence module under the Stat BDA platform developed by Dozem that has capability to collect data daily on price in the large size, and it can provide details on the product price in e-commerce platform in Malaysia, such as Lazada, Lelong, and Mudah, and this statistic will be analysed and transformed into meaningful and insightful information on e-commerce, informal sector, and micro industry. Okay, next. So finally, we are looking forward to engage in such forum or events in the near future, and it will be beneficial to share our experiences and also to gain knowledge of other compilers and data users. Digital ways of doing business is becoming more complex, and such engagement will provide the opportunity to explore other methods, strategies in gathering the required information. Thank you from both of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a well-crafted presentation by Mazriha and Narazarine. And now can we invite questions from the audience? Maybe I can just kickstart to say, what are some of the key challenges that you've had to overcome to come up with these statistics, just as a starter?
Okay. Okay, the challenges is when we try to when we crawl the data, so we can get the exact information on the activity, what kind of the product they are selling and what category, and the names, because they are using more than one accounts. So we cannot identify who are the entrepreneurs who doing the online business and e-commerce. Yeah, that is the part of data crawling challenges.
And there is a question from somebody just named guest. He or she says, can you please explain a little bit more on e-commerce income and expenditure? When you say income, do you mean the income generated through e-commerce and the expenditure incurred through e-purchase by households?
Aslim, please.
This one is actually e-commerce income from the establishment, since the survey is on the establishment.
Okay. Okay. Maybe can we go back to another question? But I think this that was from Sonam. I guess that is. Is it Sonam from Bhutan or Laos? I'm not sure. But anyway, there was a question raised by Stats New Zealand earlier on, but this was to our colleagues from Indonesia. Our colleagues from Indonesia, can you just put yourself up again? Can you hear me? Lovadita, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, there was a question, we just didn't have enough time, but before we go back, can you try to respond to this question? There was a question that came from Stats New Zealand, which was saying or asking, that are there market prices are the market prices included? Are they only based in Indonesia, or there are other ones which are very important or from other countries?
I am sorry, I can hear you clearly about the question because the bad signal here. Can I read the question instead?
Yeah, please.
Where can I see the question, Alex?
Okay, I will just copy and paste the question again.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see it now?
Are there marketplaces included that are based in Indonesia only, that are based in the other countries? Okay, the marketplace that include in both the e-commerce survey or on the study about the non-cash payment transaction is the marketplace that take place in Indonesian only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. And we have a question again from Stats New Zealand, but this one is to Malaysia. And the question is, are there significant e-commerce exports?
Yes, thank you, New Zealand. As I mentioned before, we have the statistic on e-commerce international for international market, but this is only a proxy for export. That's all, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any other questions? Otherwise, oh yeah, there is.
We're separate.
There was a question from Bimlesh from Fiji Stats. Can you read that question, our colleagues from Malaysia?
So the separate survey conducted to collect information from establishment on the e-commerce related to question were included in the existing survey to extend the administrative data. So for Malaysia, it's actually we come with the performance of e-commerce revenue. It's basically from the short-term indicator we do on monthly and quarterly basis for the establishment. So for the question is actually for establishment with doing the e-commerce transaction. And next, to extend the administrative data available with organization use. We do have another data administrative from agencies, but we use that as a guideline based on our surveys actually from the performance.
Okay, thanks very much. I can see that there are no further questions. So I think we are well past the hour, but let me take this opportunity to thank our presenters, Mazleha, Narazalin, and then Jaron from Stats New Zealand, as well as Lofa from Indonesia, as well as Nasruddin, who was probably listening behind the scenes. So I think thank you very much for really agreeing to present during this Stats Cafe. It's been a great presentation. I think it's one of the topics that has attracted a lot of interest. I think based on the numbers of participants we've seen, I think this topic is of great interest to the region. And as Rike said in the opening remarks, I think there's a lot of interest as we had seen from one of the inception webinars we had with our colleagues from UNSD New York, that digitalization is a topic that is really on the high agenda of the research for the SNA update. And going forward, I think we'll be reaching out in collaboration with UNSD to really get countries to experiment with producing experimental data on digitalization within the context of the SNA update to see whether this can work, this cannot work in the context of the entire SNA framework. So you'll be getting those letters addressed to your chief statisticians soon. So be prepared to take part in, I mean, this SNA update is actually very interesting in the sense that I would say it's probably the most democratic one, because we are consulting each and every country to give its input and actually influence, you know, the entire global standards. And I think it's a great opportunity for our region and discuss. And I would also like to invite you all to fill in the questionnaire that has been posted there for our evaluation. I think Ing has posted a questionnaire for evaluation. We would really appreciate if you took time to put your comments. It's a very short form, so please feel free to do to fill those questions, and we'll appreciate so much so that we can do better next time. And it's really been great. And we've also seen a lot of questions about availability of this session. So we normally have this available online, and everything has been recorded, so you can access the audio record as well as the PowerPoints for this session, for the entire of this session, or this Stats Cafe rather. And feel free to go through the entire Stats Cafe page, where you will have a look at different sessions. We'll be organizing another Stats Cafe related to economic statistics, I think towards the end of September, if not early August. We'll keep you posted, but likely we'll be doing something on COVID and tourism and big data. So it's something that is going along the same lines of how digitalization is actually working. So thank you very much, and please take your time to fill this survey. And I would also like to thank everybody for taking your time to join us today for the questions, and to our presenters for the candid and very detailed responses to the questions that you actually responded to. So thanks so much, and have a great day, and take care of yourself. We'll see you next time.